Welcome back to BHookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany, and in this tutorial we're going to learn how to crochet the Reversible Tunisian Crochet boot cuffs. This is a free pattern that's available at BHookedCrochet.com, and you can find the link to that pattern in the description below. For this tutorial, you're going to need one skein of Red Heart Boutique Unforgettable yarn in the colorway of your choice, one skein of Caron Simply Soft yarn, also in the color of your choice. You'll need a double-ended crochet hook that's a size 5.5 millimeter, and you'll need a darning needle and a pair of scissors. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin this pattern by using our Simply Soft yarn, and we just need to create a slip knot. And then we're going to insert that on our double-ended hook. Now it's very important that you're using a double-ended hook for this project, because if you're not, it's not going to work. You can't use a standard Tunisian crochet hook when you're working in the round. That's one of the cool parts about using this double-ended hook, is it opens up a whole new world of fun with Tunisian crochet. Begin making your chain of 46 by simply yarning over, pulling through the loop on your hook. That's your first chain. This loop on your hook never counts as a chain. And you want to crochet your chains somewhat loose. As you can see, I'm doing this pretty loosely. Now, one thing you may notice in the background here is I like to separate the two yarns that I'm working with, and I've got my Red Heart yarn, the Unforgettable, over on one side, and I've got my Simply Soft off to the other side, and that's just to keep things from getting tangled, and you'll sort of get the feel for that as we go along. Once you've got your chain of 46, go ahead and take the time to make sure that this fits around your calf. And you want to keep in mind too that you're probably going to be wearing these over jeans, so you want to make sure that you allow a little extra room for the clothing that you might be wearing. The pattern itself is extremely flexible, so if you need to add chains or take away chains to fit your calf, it's not going to change anything at all for you as you follow along with this video. So go ahead and make sure you have a chain that fits comfortably around your calf. And as I said, you want it to be just slightly bigger because this is going to shrink up as you go along. At this point, we're ready to join to the other side so that we make a ring. And we want to make sure that our chain isn't twisted in any way. So I'm just running my finger down the chain until I've reached the other side to take out any of the twists. And then I'm just going to insert my hook into that very first chain that we made. And I just like to hold on to those loops as I get things situated. I'm grabbing my working yarn now. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to slip stitch these two loops together to secure the ring. Now we've got our ring, and we're ready to get started with our boot cuff. One of the characteristics of Tunisian crochet is that we technically have to create two passes to create one row. We have a forward pass going in one direction where we work loops onto our hook, and then we have a backward pass that basically sets us up for the next row. Keeping that in mind, normally we work a flat piece, we have to go forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards. And when we're working in the round, we can't make that happen because eventually we're going to have so many loops on our hook and we're not going to be able to go anymore. So that's where the other end comes in handy. We're going to work the loops onto our hook in the forward direction. And then we slide our work to the other side, and that's where our second color comes into play. We're going to work the loops back off of our hook in the other direction. So to get started, you just want to have your work on one side of your hook, and you're just going to insert your hook into the chain. Now I just go under that top loop. You can go under 2 if that's more comfortable, and you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And I typically like to exaggerate this a little bit because, as you can see, the neck of the crochet hook is smaller than, you know, the actual crochet hook itself. And so you want to make these loops relatively loosely because you're going to have to slide your hook back and forth. And if you're crocheting too tightly, that's going to make things much more difficult for you. So we just locate the next chain. I insert my hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop and leave that on my hook. Now I find the next chain, do the same thing, yarn over, pull up a loop, leave it there. Find the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then I'm going to find the next chain, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And we're just going to repeat this until we have so many loops on our hook that we can't really go any further. Once you have several loops on your hook, now you can typically work about half of the stitches on your hook before you have to start working in the opposite direction. So when you've got it to a point where you think, okay, I can't really fit any more on here, just for this portion we're gonna set it down for now because we have to get our second yarn set up. So you just grab a little bit of your new yarn. We're gonna create a slip knot again. Okay, and I'm just keeping that slip knot on my finger. Now I'm picking up my work. I've got the Simply Soft yarn coming from this direction. And what I want to do is slide the stitches down to the other end of the hook. And now I'm just going to rotate it. Okay, rotate it in that direction. And then you'll just want to place the new yarn on your hook, tighten up that slip knot, and now we're all set up to go. For the first stitch, basically to attach this new yarn, you just want to pull it through that first loop. And then the repeat for any of this the pass in this direction, you're going to be yarning over with the boutique yarn and pulling through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, and pull through 2. And if you look at it, you're yarning over, you're pulling through the boutique yarn, and then you're pulling through the Simply Soft. So that's a little visual cue for you. And you just want to do this until you have, you know, 3 or 4 loops remaining on your hook. You want to make sure that you leave a couple loops on there to keep your tension in check. But you want to work off enough that you can keep going and add more stitches to the other side. And you'll see I'm pushing the yarn back as I go. So I'm yarning over and then I'm pushing back. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm making this loop that's on my hook the proper gauge, because when I first yarn over and pull through, it's on the neck of the hook, and as I said before, that's a smaller portion, so the gauge is incorrect. And I want to make sure these loops are relatively loose so they flow back and forth on this double-ended hook as easily as possible. Now that I've got just 3 loops left over on my hook, I'm going to drop the red heart yarn. I'm going to slide the work to the other side of my hook, and then I'm going to rotate it in this direction. And that's going to put the Simply Soft yarn back in my correct hand, and we can just keep going. So we just want to insert our hook into every chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and leave those loops on our hook. When you've worked yourself around to the very beginning, you want to make sure that you work a loop onto that very last stitch or that last chain. And then you want to make sure that your work is in the proper direction. Now it likes to twist around. One of the properties of Tunisian crochet is that your work will tend to curl a little bit, so it's going to try to twist on you. So you want to make sure that basically this cast on edge here stays at the bottom, and you want to make sure that you've got your new yarn coming from the top. And when you're set up that way, you're going to make your first join in this loop right here. So this is where the unforgettable yarn was joined, but that was a stitch, so we don't want to neglect it. We're just going to insert our hook there, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And the cool thing about working with this double-ended hook is that we don't have to join. We're going to be working in a spiral fashion. And so from here, we've got basically our first row set up. And now we're going to start working into the bars. Okay, so you're looking at your work and you see, okay, well, there's essentially 2 loops right here. And you just want to make sure you're working under one of those loops, and those are called the bars in the Tunisian crochet. And you just yarn over, pull up a loop like normal. Now I'm getting to the point where I've got a lot of loops on my hook, so I'm just going to drop the Simply Soft yarn. I'm going to slide my work to the other side, and then I'm going to rotate it so that it's set up in the direction that I can work the boutique yarn through it. So just like before, we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And you're just going to repeat that until you've got about 3 loops or so on your hook. Once you've got just a few loops remaining on your hook, again, you're just going to drop that yarn, slide the work down to the other end, and rotate your hook. And then we're going to pick up our Simply Soft and keep working. So again, we want to make sure that we are working at the direction so that this chain is sitting on the top. And we just want to find the next bar to work into, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now you may be wondering what this stitch is called, and this is called the Tunisian Simple Stitch. And it's pretty cool actually. Once we get a few more rounds in play, you'll really start to see the pattern that it creates. And one of the cool things about it is the back of the work looks like the garter stitch in knit, or the purl stitch in it. So that's what makes this pattern reversible, is that this stitch looks pretty cool on either side, and especially when you're mixing it with this other yarn that's variegated, it looks really cool. So you're probably getting pretty comfortable with this technique. If you're brand new to Tunisian, then you may find yourself working a little bit slower, and that's perfectly fine. This is a relatively quick pattern. You can finish one boot cuff in about 3 hours or so, so it's not terrible, and you're learning a pretty neat stitch and technique along the way. Now you can take the principles that you're using in this tutorial and for this pattern, and you can apply it to other things. Anything that you want to crochet in the round like this. In Tunisian crochet, you're going to use this double-ended hook, and you're basically going to use these same principles. You have to have 2 yarns. Now they don't necessarily have to be different colors. You can just work the same color, but you do have to have it coming from 2 separate sources, as we do in this video. But you can make some pretty cool things. You could take the same pattern and make some wrist warmers, or you could do a purse or a hat with the drawstring bind off. You could do quite a few things. Okay, I've got several loops on my hook. I'm going to slide it down to the other side. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to pick up my boutique yarn here. Now this loop has fallen off my hook, and if that happens, don't worry. I usually just try to save it, pull that loop through, and then just place it back on my hook. And there we go. Now we're set to go. So I'm just, again, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. It's really simple. This is all there is to this pattern. You're just going to keep doing this over and over. And as we reach the other side, we don't have to worry about joining or anything. We're just going to work this same forward and back motion. Okay, I've got it so there are just 3 loops left on my hook. I'm dropping that yarn, sliding it down, and rotating. Once you get these motions down, you'll find that this goes really fast, and it's pretty easy. Now once you get past the first probably 3 to 4 rounds, it'll get much easier because you'll have more to hold on to. You'll get past this initial rolling portion that we have to deal with Tunisian crochet. And since everything else is the same at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and pause, and I'm going to finish crocheting up my boot cuff until I have 19 rounds. And you can count the rounds. I count the rounds by looking at the rows of color of the boutique yarn. So when you have 19 of these, then come back to the video. We'll talk about the bind off technique, and we'll finish up this little project. Okay, I've made it around all the way until I have the proper number of rows. Now again, I mentioned it's easy to count the rows of the boutique yarn, and you want to make sure that you have 19 of these that are finished, and then this extra one here is going to be the 20th. And we have to do that because we need an extra round, so that we can't just leave the boot cuff like this. We can't just bind off because we have this row of holes. So we have to fill those up, and the way we do that is using the bind off technique. Now what I have done is I have worked all of the loops off of my hook using my boutique yarn coming from this direction here. And I want to set myself up so I have one loop of the boutique yarn and one loop of the Simply Soft yarn. And once I've got it into that position, I'm gonna take that last Simply Soft loop on my hook and I'm gonna pull it through the boutique yarn loop. And we're just gonna leave that there. That's gonna start off our binding off method. Now the next thing we want to do is insert our hook into the next bar. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop just like we always do, but then we're going to pull that loop through the loop on our hook. And basically what we're doing is slip stitching off. And as you can see, and you've probably figured out, when you pull up on these bars, that's when you pull this chain into place and close up that hole. So I've inserted my hook into the bar, and I yarn over, pull through and through. And one thing to keep in mind, you want to do this pretty loose, because if you are slip stitching too tight, then this portion of the boot cuff might not fit comfortably around your leg. So I just like to yarn over, pull up a loop. I'm real exaggerated with it. I pulled the hook down a little bit so I've got my loops on the correct portion of the hook. And then I'll go ahead and pull it through the loop on my hook. At this point, you just want to complete this last round where you're binding off. You're just going to do this the same way in every single stitch until we've reached the beginning. When you've come back around, you want to make sure that you don't miss any of these stitches. So I've got the tail end of my boutique yarn right there, but I can see I have one more bar that needs to be worked in, so I don't want to skip that. I'm going to slip stitch that off. And then I've got this bar here that's coming from where our boutique yarn is, and I don't need to work into that stitch. What I'm going to do is put my hook under both of the loops of that boutique yarn, and I'm going to slip stitch. And we're doing that because we want to cover up that boutique yarn because it doesn't match the rest of our bind off. We've got the Simply Soft yarn on top, and so we don't want one loop that just has the green color in this case. And so just for the sake of security, I'm going to then slip stitch into the next stitch. I'm putting my hook under both of the loops and just slip stitch, and then I'm all finished. So I'm going to place my hook down. I'm going to cut myself a tail that's about 4 to 5 inches. And then we're just going to pull that tail through the loop on the hook. And then we'll do the same with the boutique yarn. We're going to just leave ourselves a little bit of a tail to weave in and trim it off. And now we need to turn our boot cuff so that it's on the other side. Look how cool that is. I love this pattern. It's so neat. I like to weave in the tails on this side because I have a tendency of wearing them on the other sides, and I feel like you can hide the tail a little bit better in the texture of this purl stitch basically. So we're just going to take our darning needle and thread one of our tails. I'm working on the Simply Soft first. And this is coming from the bind off edge. So this was the last one that I worked. And I like to just put my darning needle, run it through the next stitch to kind of pull things down so the transition is a little bit nicer. And then I'm just going to work it into the portion that only has the Simply Soft. Now this part's kind of difficult. It's, you know, not a very secure way of weaving in your ends, and you're going to see a little bit of texture, but I do like to go back and forth several times to add some more security since we don't really have a dense stitch to work into. But I haven't had any issues with the tails working themselves out, and I've actually worn these many times over the past couple weeks, so you shouldn't have any trouble. Once you get it worked through a few stitches, then you'll just want to cut off the extra and then work your next tail. So we'll just thread this tail, and since this is coming from the row below, I don't just want to jump over like that because then I'm going to leave a loop up on the top. So what I'm going to do is just insert my darning needle next to it so I'm coming out the other side and not over the top. And from here I'm going to stay on that same little green row here just so I make sure I'm weaving it into the same place, so it's going to hide the tail a little bit better. I'm going to work it under several stitches and then just repeat the same thing that we did before. Go back and forth several times. Make sure you've got it as secure as you can possibly get it, and then you'll just trim off the extra. And then all that's left to do is repeat the same step on the other side for the last two tails. So I'm going to find these last two, and this is where we started off, and you can see there's more of a noticeable transition right here, and that's just the nature of working in a spiral. What I have found works to conceal that a little bit is, again, just thread my darning needle, and I like to take the tail and work it into the next stitch. So just find a place, and when you pull that tight, it pulls the, you know, the point down, so it makes it a little less noticeable. And then you just do exactly the same. Just work it under as many stitches as you can. Now work the same process for this last boutique strand tail. And again, I'm going to, instead of jumping over the top, I'm just going to put it in through, like going through the other side, and then just working it into this last row of the same color. This concludes our tutorial for the Reversible Tunisian Crochet boot cuffs. You'll want to go ahead and crochet the second boot cuff in the exact same way as we just did this one, and you'll be set to go. Stay tuned for more tutorials and free patterns from BHookedCrochet.com.